expected to see. Not from a press conference, not from a staged event, but from deep beneath the most contested ground on earth, the Temple Mount. In the dim light of an underground tunnel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu walks in silence. Around him, no bodyguards, no journalists, only engineers, archaeologists, and senior rabbis, men whose presence means this is not routine. This is deliberate. For years, Netanyahu has declared, Jerusalem is eternal. But here, below the surface, those words seem heavier, as if they carry not just political weight, but prophetic significance. Why was he there? To inspect archaeology? To claim history? Or was this the first public step toward rebuilding the temple itself? Above ground, life in Jerusalem went on. Tourists prayed at the Western Wall. Vendors sold bread in the markets. But under their feet, something ancient was stirring. Something that could change the destiny of nations. And so the question rises, are we watching history being made or prophecy being fulfilled? It happened days before the photograph, a meeting so discreet it left no trace in official schedules, no leak to the press. The location, a secure hall near the Davidson Center, south of the Temple Mount, where the stones of Herod's retaining wall still loom like silent sentinels from the past. Inside, a small but formidable assembly waited, the chief rabbinate, robed and solemn, leaders from the Temple Institute, guardians of sacred tradition, high-ranking IDF officers in plain clothes, their posture betraying military precision, a handful of foreign observers, their faces unfamiliar, but their interest unmistakable. And among them, Israel's most respected archaeologists, their hands resting on both modern tablets and parchment scroll reproductions. The air hummed with anticipation as holographic scans were projected against the wall, revealing the hidden strata beneath the mount. Layer by layer, the ancient heart of Jerusalem unfolded. Chambers long sealed, stairways leading to nowhere, and a flat stone platform directly beneath the dome of the rock. Its dimensions matched historical accounts of the first temple's foundation stone. The room fell silent as Netanyahu spoke, his voice low but firm. We're not taking land. We're taking history back. It was not the language of politics. It was the language of reclamation. A statement not aimed at an audience, but at the generations who had waited for this moment. From that gathering, the decision was made. The Prime Minister himself would descend, not to observe, but to signal to those in the know that the time had come to move from theory to preparation. And so, when the descent began, they were not stepping into a dusty relic of the past. They were entering a living structure, one that had been waiting in darkness for its appointed hour. Beneath the mount, the descent is not swift. One passes through narrow corridors, where the air grows cooler and the light thinner. The smell of earth and limestone is heavy, as if the stones themselves are exhaling centuries of silence. Beneath the Temple Mount lies a network of passageways, some etched in the days when Solomon's temple rose above, others reinforced with steel and concrete in recent months, under cover of night. These are not random excavations. Each turn, each archway, has been cleared and stabilized with meticulous care. At the heart of one chamber stand massive load-bearing columns, newly strengthened but ancient in design. Their spacing, height, and breadth are no accident. They mirror the sacred measurements recorded in the biblical blueprints for the temple itself. Engineers work methodically, their instruments tracking weight tolerances and seismic resistance. Yet to those who understand prophecy, this is not just engineering. It is preparation for glory. Within the archives of the Western Wall Heritage Foundation, Leaked reports speak of underground maps, aligning with the prophetic vision in Haggai 2:9. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. And in a moment of unguarded candor, one engineer, caught on a muted recording, utters a phrase that now circulates in hushed tones: "When the time comes, the world will see it all at once." This is not an archaeological dig to satisfy curiosity. It is a concealed construction site, one whose unveiling could shake both the religious and political balance of the world. But such a project cannot exist in isolation. It is part of a larger plan, one in which prophecy and politics are playing a dangerous game above ground. Above the ground, the Temple Mount remains one of the most volatile pieces of real estate on Earth, a sacred summit where faith, politics, and centuries of bloodshed intersect. Yet below the surface, a strategy is unfolding that could alter the destiny of nations. Theologically, the stakes are immense. For many who study prophecy, the return of a functioning temple is not optional. It is a necessary precursor to events foretold in Scripture. Without it, certain end-time prophecies remain incomplete. With it, the clock of destiny begins to move in a way the world cannot ignore. But building on the mount itself would ignite a firestorm. Islamic holy sites stand directly above, guarded fiercely by both faith and politics. Any attempt to dismantle or replace them could plunge the Middle East into chaos overnight. So, the plan takes shape underground, stone by stone, beam by beam, in spaces hidden from public view. This is political chess played in the shadows, where every move is calculated years in advance. And in a twist few would have imagined, discreet conversations have already taken place with moderate Muslim scholars. They explore what some call a side-by-side sanctity, a radical vision where different faiths share the same sacred plateau without erasing each other's presence. It's a fragile conversation, one that echoes the warning of Matthew 24:15. When you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation. The pieces are on the board, the moves are being made, and the outcome will touch not just Jerusalem, but the world. Yet even in the most careful of strategies, there are mysteries that refuse to stay buried. And one in particular has returned to the forefront: the fate of the Ark of the Covenant. For decades, it was a matter of debate. A claim made by the late explorer Ron Wyatt that the Ark of the Covenant lay hidden beneath the Temple Mount. His account was dismissed by many as speculative, even fanciful. But in recent years, technology has changed the conversation. New LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar scans have revealed anomalies beneath the mount, chambers perfectly sealed, their shapes suggesting intentional construction. Some lie more than 30 feet below the surface, untouched for over 2 millennia. Rumors swirl in Jerusalem's back channels. Some claim that one such chamber has been entered, its contents catalogued, secured, and removed to an undisclosed location. Others insist the chamber remains sealed, its treasures waiting for the right prophetic moment. No official word has been given. The silence from Israeli authorities is deafening, and in that silence, speculation grows louder by the day. For believers, the Ark is more than an artifact. It is the earthly throne of God, the vessel that once held the stone tablets of the covenant. And yet, Jeremiah 3:16 foretells a time when they will no longer say, "The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord." It will not be remembered or missed, nor will another one be made. Could this be that time? Or will the Ark yet reappear as a sign to both Israel and the nations that the moment for temple worship has arrived? The question hangs unanswered, suspended between faith and archaeology, between heaven's timing and man's ambition. And while the ark may remain hidden, the tools of temple service, crafted with painstaking devotion, are already prepared and quietly moving into place. For years, the Temple Institute in Jerusalem has labored quietly but relentlessly, recreating every vessel described in the Torah: the golden menorah, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the silver trumpets. Each has been forged to exact biblical specifications down to the smallest detail. Priestly garments, woven with blue, purple, and scarlet threads, lie ready in sealed storage, their gold-threaded sashes awaiting the moment they will once again serve before the altar. Even the breastplate of the high priest, set with 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel, gleams as it did in the days of Aaron. In recent weeks, reports have surfaced of these vessels being moved under heavy guard to secure underground locations, not museums, but functional spaces where they can be tested and readied for service at a moment's notice. One eyewitness describes seeing a covered cart, flanked by armed guards, vanish into a sealed tunnel entrance near the western wall. No official explanation was given, but those who recognized what they saw understand. All the physical requirements for renewed temple worship are now complete. The only thing missing is the temple itself. And as these preparations move quietly forward, the outside world is beginning to take notice and react. News like this doesn't stay local anymore. In a world where a photo can circle the globe in minutes, Netanyahu's quiet walk beneath the mount was never going to remain in the shadows. At the United Nations, ambassadors gathered for an emergency meeting. In that hall, you could hear the tension in every speech. Words of warning, accusations, and the familiar calls for restraint. The Vatican issued a careful statement, reminding the world that Jerusalem belongs to the hearts of many and urging respect between faiths. From Iran and Turkey came fiery condemnations, accusing Israel of trying to erase Islamic heritage. But in a surprise twist, Jordan and Saudi Arabia suggested something almost unthinkable: talks about creating a shared sacred space. Some say it's just politics. Others believe it could be the start of something much bigger, perhaps even the kind of arrangement prophecy hints at. For those who watch Jerusalem closely, these events stir the words of Psalm 122, verse 6. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. But peace here has always been fragile, and with every step taken beneath the mount, that fragile balance is tested again, which makes this question impossible to ignore. Why does this moment feel so different from every attempt that came before? The idea of rebuilding the temple isn't new. It surfaced many times, in speeches, in activist movements, even in whispered plans among rabbis. But every time the same roadblocks appeared: political backlash, religious division, and the constant threat of violence. Now, for the first time, something has changed. Political will exists at the very top. Religious leaders from different streams are speaking with unusual unity. Archaeologists have verified structures beneath the mount that match the descriptions passed down for centuries. And behind the scenes, military planners are making sure the work can be protected, hidden from the chaos above. This isn't a fringe movement anymore. It's not the dream of one group working in isolation. It's the state itself, its leaders, its spiritual authorities, and its experts, quietly moving in the same direction. The Temple Mount, for so long a frozen symbol of stalemate, is shifting. And when things in Jerusalem begin to shift, history has a way of following. And if history is starting to move, that means the prophetic countdown may already be underway. For many Christians, A rebuilt temple is more than just a symbol. It's a sign that the timeline described in the Bible is reaching its final chapters, the return of Christ drawing near, and the rise of the one Scripture calls the Great Deceiver. For observant Jews, it's about the restoration of covenant worship, the return of sacrifices, the renewal of a promise made to their ancestors thousands of years ago. The beliefs differ, but the sense of urgency is the same. Luke 21:28 speaks to moments like this. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. This countdown isn't marked by dates on a calendar. It's marked by the kind of events that once seemed impossible, now happening one after another. If these signs are real, then now is the time to pay attention. And that takes us back to where this story began, to a single moment underground that may change the course of history. That day beneath the mount, Netanyahu wasn't surrounded by politicians or reporters. He was joined by men who carry sacred responsibility, archaeologists who know the weight of history, rabbis who know the weight of prophecy, and builders preparing for something meant to last. They walked through chambers where the air is still and cool, past stones that have been silent witnesses for thousands of years. And if what's being said is true, they aren't just restoring what's broken. They're preparing for what's coming. The vessels are ready. The priestly garments are ready. The hidden spaces are being uncovered. Piece by piece, the picture is coming together. And so the question is left for us. Will we see the season we're in? Or will this moment slip past, only to be understood when it's too late? Jerusalem is stirring. History is moving beneath our feet. And the story isn't over.
Promised land in the 1800s, the land was dry and barren. Today, more than half of Israel is still desert. But just like the Bible says, Israelis have found unique ways to make the desert bloom and prosper.
We are living in a time when the pages of the Bible are coming true. The Dead Sea has received fresh water, just as Ezekiel predicted. And now the dry desert is blooming, just as Isaiah prophesied. No bird calls, no rustle of leaves, only the silent, unbroken weight of the desert. But then, a bead of water slides down an irrigation line, winding across the barren sand like a silver vein. Tiny shoots pierce the dust, trembling in the breeze. Day by day, green spreads across the gold and gray, until the land is no longer empty, but clothed in color. Roses bloom where thorns once reigned. Groves of pomegranate and date palm sway gently, their roots drawing life from hidden streams. We are living in a time when the words of ancient prophecy are stepping out of the pages of Scripture and into the headlines of our day. Ezekiel spoke of living water flowing into the Dead Sea, and we have seen it. And Isaiah spoke of deserts bursting into life, and before our very eyes, the Negev blooms. What the ancient people of God could only imagine, we now witness in vivid color. A wilderness transformed into a garden. A sign that God's word never fails. Isaiah's prophecy and the meaning of the blooming desert image. Before we witness the breathtaking sight of Israel's desert bursting into life, we must first journey back in time to uncover the prophecy that foretold it. Long before the modern world, long before irrigation systems or advanced agriculture, these words were spoken words that seemed impossible, even laughable, to those who first heard them. It is the 8th century before Christ. The people of Israel live under the shadow of a rising empire, Assyria, whose armies are swift, brutal, and relentless. The threat of invasion hangs over every conversation. War has swept through the hills and plains, stripping the land of its beauty. Fields that once yielded grain and olives now lie abandoned, overgrown with thorns. Villages stand in ruins. The once vibrant heart of the land beats faintly. It was not only a physical crisis, but a spiritual one. The people were divided. Leaders stumbled in moral compromise. The covenant with God, meant to be their anchor, had been neglected. And yet, it was into this bleak backdrop that the prophet Isaiah was called to speak. His words did not ignore the pain or the ruin, but in the midst of desolation, he painted a vision so stunning, so unexpected, that it must have sounded almost impossible. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus, Isaiah proclaimed in chapter 35. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. In another moment, Isaiah speaks the words of the Lord himself. I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, and the olive. To his first hearers, these were not simply pretty words. In the ancient world, deserts were more than landscapes. They were symbols. The desert represented lifelessness, exile, judgment. It was the place you passed through quickly, praying you would survive. To speak of a desert rejoicing was to speak of something humanly unthinkable, a reversal so complete it could only be the work of God. The imagery carried a dual meaning. On one level, it described the land itself, once barren, bursting with life again. On another, it spoke to the hearts of the people, dry and cracked with rebellion, being revived, softened, and made fruitful once more. And Isaiah was not speaking in isolation. His vision echoed the promises given centuries earlier through Moses, that when God's people turned back to him, he would restore them to their land. Deuteronomy 33:5. It harmonized with the later vision of Ezekiel, who spoke of the land yielding its fruit again, so transformed that others would say, "This land that was desolate has become like the Garden of Eden." For Isaiah's generation, this was a call to hope in the midst of ruin. For later generations, it became a prophecy that waited, year after year, century after century, for its fulfillment. And today, when we see fields of green where only stone and sand once lay, when we see orchards heavy with fruit in the heart of the Negev, we are not simply witnessing good farming. We are watching the echo of Isaiah's voice cross 2,700 years and touch the soil again. What seemed distant and impossible is now blooming before the eyes of a watching world. The prophecy we've heard from Isaiah might have sounded poetic, perhaps even symbolic, to those who first heard it. But today, you don't need to imagine it. You can see it, touch it, even taste it. Travel with me to the Negev desert. For thousands of years, this land was the very picture of Isaiah's wilderness, a rocky expanse where rain is scarce and temperatures scorch the soil. Ancient caravans passed through here, their camels carrying spices and salt, but few lingered. The land could not sustain life in abundance. But now, as you crest the rise of a dusty hill, you might be startled by what lies below. Rows upon rows of green vines stretching toward the horizon. Grapes hang heavy in the sunlight, destined to be pressed into fine wines, some of them award-winning on the international stage. And beside the vineyards, the desert yields tomatoes, peppers, wheat, and olive groves. Crops thriving where, just decades ago, the only thing that grew was despair. What changed? The transformation began in the mid-20th century, when Israel's early pioneers, many of them survivors of war and exile, faced a question. Could this land, so dry and unyielding, ever feed a nation again? The answer came through innovation and determination. One of the most revolutionary breakthroughs was drip irrigation. Invented in Israel in the 1960s by engineer Simcha Blas and perfected at Kibbutz Hatzerim, this system delivers water directly to the roots of each plant, drop by precious drop. No flooding, no waste, just life where it's needed most. In a desert, every drop is sacred, and drip irrigation treats it that way. But technology alone wasn't enough. Farmers turned to desert greenhouses, structures designed to control temperature, humidity, and sunlight so precisely that crops can grow year-round, shielded from the harshest elements. And in places where there is no groundwater at all, Israel developed water from air machines, atmospheric water generators that pull moisture from the atmosphere and condense it into pure, drinkable water. The results are nothing short of astonishing. In the Arava Valley, for instance, once considered an inhospitable strip of land between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, farms now export over 50 million flowers every year to Europe. Picture that. Tulips, lilies, and other delicate blooms, varieties that would wither in a winter frost, thriving under the desert sun. These are shipped thousands of miles to brighten homes and marketplaces across the world. Even ancient plants have been brought back to life. In recent years, Israeli scientists succeeded in reviving the Judean date palm, a tree once famed in antiquity for its sweetness and size. Using seeds over 2,000 years old, discovered in archaeological excavations at Masada and Qumran, researchers coaxed them back to life. Today, these date palms are growing again, their fruit a taste from the time of the Bible itself. And it's not only plants. The desert now supports aquaculture, fish farms raising tilapia and other species in the middle of arid plains. Imagine fresh fish caught in a place where rain may not fall for months. The contrast becomes even more vivid when you look at before and after evidence. Black and white aerial photographs from the 1940s show the Negev and Arava as lifeless plains, endless brown and gray. Now, pull up modern satellite images and you'll see patchworks of deep green, fields and orchards stretching across the very same coordinates. The transformation is visible from space. For anyone who knows the scriptures, the sight is deeply moving. You stand there, feeling the dry wind on your skin, and realize that you are looking at something the prophet Isaiah described more than 27 centuries ago. And this isn't a quiet miracle hidden in some corner of the earth. It's visible, measurable, and sustained. Some will say this is simply the fruit of human ingenuity. And yes, there is truth in that. God often uses human hands to carry out His purposes. But the timing, the scale, and the location of this renewal, these align with ancient promises in ways that seem more than coincidence. Consider this. The transformation only began after the Jewish people returned to the land in significant numbers. That is precisely the sequence the Bible describes. Restoration of the people followed by restoration of the land. And here we are in the 21st century, watching the soil respond to their return. When we step back and look at the scriptures, a clear sequence emerges, one that is not random, but divinely ordered. The prophets did not simply speak of a land transformed. They described the when and the how of its renewal. In Isaiah 27:6, we read, "In days to come, Jacob will take root, Israel will blossom and bud, and fill the face of the world with fruit." At first glance, this sounds like poetic flourish, a metaphor for spiritual revival. But now, walk through an Israeli marketplace or visit the export docks, and you will see it made literal. Grapes, pomegranates, avocados, citrus fruits, and flowers, packed in crates, loaded into shipping containers, sent to every corner of the globe. The numbers speak for themselves. In a land where 60% is classified as desert, Israel now produces 95% of its own food and exports much of it abroad. This is not normal. This is not expected. This is remarkable. A century ago, travelers wrote of these same regions as wastelands. Today, the world eats from their bounty. And notice the order in which these events unfolded. For nearly 2 millennia, the land lay under the control of empires and rulers who never coaxed such abundance from it. Then, in the 20th century, the Jewish people began returning in significant numbers, survivors of the Holocaust, refugees from the Middle East and Europe, families who had clung to the dream of Zion through centuries of exile. And only after their return did the desert begin to bloom on such a scale. This is exactly what the scriptures said would happen. In Ezekiel 36, 8-9, God speaks to the land itself. But you, mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come home. I am concerned for you and will look on you with favor. You will be plowed and sown. The return of the people triggers the renewal of the land. Yes, technology has played its part. Yes, human labor has been poured into every field and greenhouse. But the extraordinary harmony between prophecy and reality defies mere chance. It follows a pattern too ancient and too precise to be coincidence. Stand in the Negev today, and you are not just looking at clever engineering or national policy. You are looking at a promise kept. You are looking at living proof that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob does not forget his word. And if he keeps his covenant with a land, with a people, across millennia of history, will he not also keep his promises to you? The blooming desert is more than an agricultural success. It is a signpost pointing forward, toward a time when all of God's promises will be fulfilled in full. When you place the blooming of Israel's deserts alongside the other events of the last century, the picture sharpens. It is no longer just an agricultural miracle. It becomes part of a prophetic tapestry, one woven through centuries and now stretching toward its final scenes. Think of the milestones. 1948. In a single day, Israel is reborn as a nation, fulfilling Isaiah 66:8. Can a nation be born in a day? Can a country be brought forth in a moment? The world watched as the Jewish people, scattered for nearly 2,000 years, returned to the map. 1967. Jerusalem, long divided and contested, is restored to Israeli control during the Six-Day War. Zechariah 12:3 foresaw that the city would become a burdensome stone to all nations, a center of global attention and contention. That prophecy, too, is alive and visible in our headlines. The ingathering from Russia, Ethiopia, Yemen, and across the world, Jewish families have returned to the land of their ancestors. Ezekiel 36:24 records God's promise, "For I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land." And now, in our generation, the desert itself blossoms. Isaiah's words stand not as isolated poetry, but as part of this chain of fulfillment. But the signs do not end there. Preparations for the Third Temple are no longer whispered dreams. They are tangible realities. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has recreated priestly garments, restored temple vessels, and trained a new generation of priests from the line of Aaron. The altar stands ready. Even the biblically required red heifers, once thought nearly impossible to find, have been bred and prepared for the purification rites. The blooming desert, then, is not simply a wonder of nature or a marvel of human ingenuity. It is a signal It is one of the visible markers the Bible gives us, a reminder that the return of the Messiah draws near. Jesus himself gave this pattern in Matthew 24:32-33. Now, learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. The desert's renewal is one of those things we were told to watch for. If the desert's transformation teaches us anything, it is this: God keeps His word. For 2.5 millennia, Isaiah's prophecy waited in the dust. The land lay silent. Empires rose and fell. Generations came and went. And yet, in our time, the desert rejoices and blossoms. Not in secret, not hidden in some remote valley, but openly, for the whole world to witness. This is more than an agricultural marvel. It is a living parable. If God can take land that was lifeless, waterless, and forsaken, and make it green again, can He not do the same for a human heart? Can He not breathe life into the places in you that feel barren and beyond hope? Every vine in the Negev, every palm tree swaying in the Arava, whispers the same truth. His promises are not empty. What He says, He will do. What He begins, He will finish. And it is not only about the soil of Israel, it is about the soil of your life. The God who restores a land after centuries of desolation is the same God who restores relationships, heals wounds, redeems failures, and calls dry bones to live again. So, if you are in a season where you feel surrounded by desert, spiritually, emotionally, or even physically, let this be your reminder. The desert is not the end. It is the place where God's power is most clearly revealed. As Isaiah's prophecy comes alive before our eyes, it calls us not only to wonder at God's faithfulness to Israel, but to trust Him with our own journey. For if He can make the wilderness sing, He can make your life sing again too. The dust swirls in the fading light as the sun dips toward the horizon. Water trickles through narrow channels, glinting gold in the last rays of day. Green leaves rustle softly in the breeze, and the scent of blossoms drifts through the air. Only decades ago, this was lifeless ground. Today, it is a living canvas of prophecy fulfilled. Farmers bend over the harvest, gathering fruit beneath skies the color of sapphire. The wilderness, once silent, hums with the sound of life. Every flower that opens in the Negev is more than a splash of beauty. It is a testimony, a declaration, a promise kept. And just as surely as the desert blooms, the Messiah will return. This is not wishful thinking. It is as certain as the sun rising tomorrow. Until that day, let us watch. Let us work. Let us rejoice. For the desert is alive again, and so is the hope that His coming is near.
Very soon we will all see the building of the third temple in Jerusalem.
The strange feeling in Jerusalem today? Why, 3 religions are waiting for something to happen. From high-level political meetings to underground excavations, from sacred rituals to satellite surveillance, eyes are turning once again toward one question that refuses to go away. Is the third temple closer to becoming reality than we think? At the surface, the city moves as it always has. Pilgrims come and go. Prayers rise from minarets and synagogues. The ancient stones bake in the sun. But beneath that surface, both literally and symbolically, something deeper stirs. There are signs, clear and compelling. Artifacts emerging from the earth. Architectural plans quietly prepared. A mysterious return of red heifers. And an undercurrent of spiritual urgency that seems to grow stronger with each passing year. Could it all be coincidence? Or is something more profound taking shape? This is a journey into the past and through the present, an investigation into buried ruins, ancient promises, and modern preparations. The story unfolds beneath our feet, between nations, and perhaps beyond time itself. But to glimpse what may come, we must begin with what once stood. Long before Jerusalem became the battleground of empires and ideologies, it was the home of a temple, unlike any the world had ever seen. The first temple, built by King Solomon nearly 3,000 years ago, was said to shine with cedar, bronze, and gold. Crafted in reverence, designed in detail, it stood as a meeting place between heaven and earth. Its foundation was more than stone, it was covenant. It held the Ark of the Covenant, the tablets of Moses, the sacred fire. According to the biblical account, Solomon built it in the mid-10th century BCE. The ruins beneath the city of David still hold traces of that time. Burned debris, broken walls, layers of destruction that match the Babylonian invasion led by Nebuchadnezzar II in 586 BCE. Jerusalem fell. The temple burned, and with it, an era ended. Yet from exile came return. From ashes came rebuilding. In 516 BCE, under Persian rule, the Second Temple was raised, less grand than Solomon's, but no less holy. Over centuries, it was enlarged and transformed, especially by Herod the Great, who turned it into a structure of towering splendor, with courtyards, porticos, and massive stones, some still visible at the base of the mount today. But its glory, too, came to an end. In 70 CE, Roman legions under Titus laid siege to Jerusalem. Fire consumed the temple once again. The city was torn apart. The Arch of Titus in Rome still shows soldiers carrying off the temple's menorah, frozen in triumph and tragedy. Today, the Western Wall, silent and solemn, stands as the most visible trace. But archaeologists have uncovered much more. Massive Herodian stones, ash layers, and ritual items from both temple eras, telling a story carved into the earth. And now, just above these buried layers of time, a very different structure stands, one that stirs hope in some and fear in others. It rises like a crown above Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. To Jews, simply Har Habayit, the mountain where the divine once dwelled. It is the most contested piece of land on earth. For the Jewish people, it is their holiest site, the place where both the first and second temples stood, where the fire of sacrifice once burned, where the Spirit of God is said to have filled the Holy of Holies. For Muslims, it is the third holiest site in Islam. Here stands the Dome of the Rock, with its golden roof gleaming in the sun. Here, the Al-Aqsa Mosque stretches across the southern side of the mount, a place of prayer and pilgrimage for over 1,000 years. Two faiths, one mountain. A history soaked in blood, beauty, and belief. Since 1967, after Israel took control of East Jerusalem, a careful balance was struck. The Waqf, a Jordanian Islamic trust, would oversee the religious structures on the mount. Israel would handle overall security. This became the status quo, an uneasy truce, preserved not by trust, but by necessity. Jews are allowed to visit, but not to pray. Muslims guard their access fiercely, and the slightest change, real or imagined, can shake nations. Tensions flare when excavations begin. Outrage erupts when a political figure ascends the mount. Even a whisper of construction can spark protests from Cairo to Jakarta. As one scholar once said, "In Jerusalem, the past is never past. It walks beside you, and it watches." And on the Temple Mount, That past is always present, sacred, shadowed, and simmering beneath the surface. But what, exactly, lies beneath that surface? What secrets are hidden in the very bedrock of belief? That question leads us to the heart of controversy, and to a story archaeology is still trying to tell. Beneath the modern city, beneath the prayers and tensions, lies a silent witness, the earth itself. For decades, archaeologists have probed the areas around the Temple Mount, uncovering traces of the city's most sacred periods. In the city of David, just south of the mount, discoveries include ritual baths, or mikvaot, burned layers, and inscribed seals believed to belong to priestly families. Each fragment speaks of a living temple culture, embedded in daily life and religious devotion. Near the western wall, hidden tunnels have revealed massive Herodian stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, part of the support system that once held the Second Temple aloft. These stones are more than architectural feats. They are echoes of a vanished world. Yet, the moment excavation edges too close to the Temple Mount itself, controversy erupts. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the 1999 incident, when the Islamic Waqf, during unsanctioned renovations, removed over 9,000 tons of soil from beneath the mount. Dumped into the Kidron Valley without archaeological supervision, it was seen by Israeli scholars as an irreversible loss. That soil held history, and some say it was thrown away. In the years that followed, volunteers sifted through the debris, uncovering pottery, coins, and other remnants ranging from the First Temple period to the Ottoman era. But what was lost may never be known. Today, access to the Mount's substructure remains nearly impossible. Political pressure, religious sensitivity, and rising threats prevent even the most neutral attempts at research. The secrets of the sacred rock remain buried, locked beneath centuries of silence. Still, while archaeologists face stone walls, others are preparing something altogether different: a return to temple service itself. In a modest building in Jerusalem's Jewish quarter, far from the roar of politics, a quiet revolution has taken shape. Founded in 1987, the Temple Institute has dedicated itself to one goal: preparing for the rebuilding of the temple, not as symbol, but as reality. Here, ancient texts become blueprints, biblical commandments become handcrafted artifacts, and ritual vessels once used by the priests, long lost to exile, have now been recreated with precision. The golden menorah, the incense altar, the Levitical garments, all restored, waiting. But the vision goes beyond objects. Architectural plans have been drawn. Training has begun. Men believed to be descendants of the priestly line, the Kohanim, are being taught the roles and rituals once reserved for temple service. This is not a reenactment. It is preparation. Still, these efforts spark debate. Within Judaism, opinions vary widely. Some believe the temple can only be rebuilt by divine command or after the coming of the Messiah. Others argue for readiness, so that when the moment comes, the people are not unprepared. Outside Jewish circles, the controversy grows even louder. Critics see these preparations as dangerous, fuel for religious extremism or political unrest. Supporters, especially among Christian Zionists, see them as fulfillment of prophecy and a sign of the approaching end of days. Whatever one believes, the question remains: how can temple rituals resume when biblical law requires ritual purity, a requirement that hinges on a rare and nearly impossible event? The answer may already be in motion. According to the Book of Numbers, chapter 19, the ashes of a perfect red heifer, an unblemished cow without spot or yoke, must be used to purify anyone entering the temple. Without it, temple service cannot begin, and for over 2,000 years, no such heifer has been found, until now. In 2022, a group of Christian Zionists in Texas, working in coordination with Jewish authorities, sent 5 red heifers to Israel. They were received with great interest and no small amount of scrutiny. Rabbis examined them closely, for even the smallest white or black hair would disqualify them. These calves are being raised under strict supervision. If, upon reaching maturity, even one remains without blemish, it could fulfill the biblical requirement. The ashes of that heifer could be used to restore ritual purity and unlock the possibility of renewed temple service. To some, this is a curiosity. To others, it is a sign. But to those watching the prophetic timeline, it is nothing short of extraordinary. The question now becomes, are these events isolated steps? Or do they signal the return of something long buried in time? And if the pieces are falling into place, how close are we to the next chapter? Across from the Temple Mount, rising above the ancient tombs that line its slopes, stands the Mount of Olives, a place rich in memory, prophecy, and mystery. But beyond its spiritual symbolism lies something even more unsettling, a geological fault line that cuts directly beneath its foundation. Geologists have confirmed that the Mount of Olives sits atop the Dead Sea Transform Fault, a seismic boundary that stretches from the Red Sea through the Jordan Rift Valley and into Lebanon. This fault has a long and violent history, triggering devastating earthquakes in 31 BCE, 363 CE, and 749 CE, all of which caused significant damage to structures in and around Jerusalem. It is a sleeping giant beneath holy ground. But what makes this even more profound is its connection to ancient prophecy. In Zechariah 14:4, the prophet describes a future moment when the Mount of Olives will split in two. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. For centuries, scholars and mystics debated whether this was symbolic or literal. Modern seismic studies suggest it could very well be both. The earth beneath Jerusalem is not still. The mount that once received Jesus' footsteps may one day tremble again. And if it does, it could change the very landscape of the city, topographically, politically, and spiritually. While the ground shifts quietly beneath our feet, history reminds us that sudden change can come without warning. And history, in this land, is never far behind. The year was 1967, and war erupted across the region. In just 6 days, Israel pushed back the armies of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, redrawing the map and reshaping the future of the Middle East. But the most significant shift came not on the battlefield, but within the walls of Jerusalem. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, Jewish forces stood at the Western Wall, weeping, praying, touching stones that had watched generations pass in exile. East Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, came under Israeli control. It was a moment of triumph, a fulfillment of longing, and yet one marked by restraint. In a move that surprised even some within its own ranks, the Israeli government decided to leave religious control of the Temple Mount in the hands of the Islamic Waqf, preserving the status quo in order to prevent further bloodshed and international backlash. That decision, made in the tension of victory, has defined the Mount's fragile balance to this day. Jews could now visit the Mount, but were not allowed to pray. The Waqf retained authority over daily operations, while Israeli security maintained overall oversight. It was a compromise, born of necessity, and sustained by fear of what might happen if the balance tipped too far. This moment in history did more than change political boundaries. It shaped the future of access, worship, and the possibility, however remote, of rebuilding the temple. And yet, even with this cautious arrangement, the mount remains under watch, because the risks of disturbing it are global. If the idea of building a third temple seems far-fetched, consider this. It is not a matter of engineering or resources or even religious will. It is a matter of global diplomacy and the razor edge of war. The Temple Mount is not merely a religious site. It is a political fault line that touches the hearts of over 1.8 billion Muslims worldwide. For many, any alteration to its status, real or perceived, is considered a red line. Even whispers of excavation or Jewish construction have sparked protests from Cairo to Jakarta, Tehran to Istanbul. Riots have erupted. Embassies have issued warnings. International councils have passed resolutions calling for restraint. The United Nations, the European Union, and multiple religious organizations have all voiced opposition to any unilateral change to the site's structure or governance. The risk is not just local, it is regional, even global. And yet, some believe the only path forward is through agreement. A future peace deal, they argue, could open the door to shared access, or even dual worship zones, a solution once unimaginable, but now quietly discussed behind closed doors. Supporters of the temple's return point to such a moment as their hope. Critics warn it could spark a conflict of unthinkable scale. Either way, the stakes are clear. Rebuilding the temple is not just a spiritual act, it is a geopolitical earthquake waiting beneath the surface. And in this city, where past and future live side by side, the ground is never truly still. While Jerusalem draws the eyes of the world, something broader is unfolding in the surrounding region, a quiet realignment of power, purpose, and prophecy. To Israel's north, a triangle of influence is taking shape. Iran, Russia, and Turkey, three nations with deep interests and ancient ties to the Middle East, have each established a growing presence in Syria, Lebanon, and the surrounding territories. Military bases, intelligence outposts, political alliances that were unthinkable just a decade ago. Some see this through the lens of strategy, competition for oil routes, trade corridors, and regional dominance. But others hear echoes of ancient texts. In Ezekiel 38, there is a vision of a northern alliance, hostile to Israel, advancing in the latter days. Scholars debate the symbolism, the geography, the names, but the parallels have stirred discussion from pulpits to parliaments. Even those who set prophecy aside cannot ignore the tension building around Jerusalem, a city barely the size of a modern airport, yet central to the beliefs, fears, and hopes of half the world's population. It is here, at this fragile crossroads, that spiritual conviction meets military preparation, and where ancient expectation begins to feel unnervingly present. If the players are taking their places, then the stage is nearly set. From buried artifacts to living blueprints, from geopolitical tremors to spiritual signs, the ground beneath Jerusalem is shifting, in stone, in spirit, and perhaps in destiny. Whether one sees this moment as the unfolding of biblical prophecy or the slow convergence of politics, history, and belief, the evidence is undeniable. Preparations for a temple, physical, political, and prophetic, are no longer whispers. They are actions made in the open, waiting for a window in time. But such a moment would not come quietly. To rebuild the temple would mean reshaping the world, politically, religiously, and emotionally. It would require sacrifice, negotiation, and a reckoning with centuries of tension. And yet, for some, it is not a matter of if, but when. Jerusalem remains the city of convergence, past and future, heaven and earth, hope and fear. And as the pieces continue to fall into place, stone by stone, law by law, sign by sign, the question is no longer if change will come. The question is, how will it arrive? And what will it demand of the world that watches? It began with a photograph, one that raced through news feeds and private messaging groups faster than anyone could have predicted. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. A flag rising above the dry, pale hills of the Jordan Valley. But a closer look revealed something that sent ripples through political offices and prayer gatherings alike. This was not the blue and white banner of Israel. It was not the familiar emblem of any state or nation. Instead, its white fabric carried a stark, unmistakable image. A golden outline of the temple, as described in the Hebrew Scriptures, the crown jewel of ancient Jerusalem. It was the flag of the Third Temple movement, a symbol that for some represents hope, restoration, and the fulfillment of God's promises, but for others, ignites a deep and dangerous fear of religious conflict. Its location made the moment even more combustible. The flag was planted not in the heart of Jerusalem, but in territory the world recognizes as Palestinian, a wedge of contested land in the Jordan Valley, where every step is shadowed by competing claims, and where the soil is as much a battlefield of history as it is a piece of ground. For believers in the temple's return, this flag was a proclamation, the vision of Ezekiel, the promises of the prophets, and the longing of generations were not forgotten. For others, it was a provocation, a signal that religion was once again stepping into the arena of political control in the most sensitive square mile of earth. Why here? Why now? The Jordan Valley has always been more than just a stretch of wilderness. It is the crossing place where Joshua led Israel into the Promised Land. It is the backdrop of Elijah's final moments before the chariot of fire took him. It is the threshold between wilderness and promise. And now, with this flag, it has become a stage for a new chapter, one that may point toward events the world has long expected and feared. Is this simply the work of a small, zealous faction, or is it a carefully timed message, a whisper of a coming shift that could one day carry that same flag to the Temple Mount itself? In this part of the world, nothing is accidental, and nothing, once set in motion, stops easily. And just as this flag was stirring debates, another moment approached, one tied not to politics alone, but to centuries of grief and remembrance. Every summer, under the heavy heat of the Middle Eastern sun, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av arrives. For the Jewish people, it is not a holiday, but a memorial, a day steeped in ashes, fasting, and the reading of Lamentations. Tisha B'Av is the day when they remember two of the most devastating moments in their history: the destruction of Solomon's temple by Babylon in 586 BC and the destruction of the Second Temple by Rome in AD 70. Both events left Jerusalem in ruins, and both have been carved deep into the national memory like wounds that never fully heal. Traditionally, it is a day of stillness. Shops close, songs fall silent, prayers turn to mourning. And yet, this year, the stillness trembled. For decades, Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount has been banned under the so-called status quo agreement, a fragile arrangement intended to keep peace by keeping worship restricted. But on this Tisha B'Av, something remarkable happened. More Jewish worshippers than ever ascended the Temple Mount. Some walked in solemn silence, but others dared to sing, softly yet audibly, words of hope and determination. We will build the temple. These were not chants shouted in protest. They were almost whispers, carried on the wind, yet powerful enough to break decades of carefully maintained silence. To the casual passerby, the moment might have gone unnoticed, but to those who understood the history of this place and the prophecies tied to it, it was like watching a fault line shift beneath their feet. The Temple Mount has always been the spiritual epicenter of Israel's past, and, according to many, the prophetic centerpiece of its future. And now, on a day meant for mourning its loss, people were openly speaking of its return. It was only the beginning, and soon an even bolder declaration would follow. This time, from one of the highest offices in Israel itself. The scene unfolded beneath the golden glare of the Dome of the Rock. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security, walked across the Temple Mount with an entourage and cameras trailing close behind. The world had barely processed the images from Tisha B'Av when his words rang out like a declaration of intent. The Temple Mount is ours. It was not an offhand comment. It was measured, deliberate, spoken into a microphone for all to hear. And then came the statement that crystallized his vision. Israel must build the temple again. Around him, small groups of Jewish visitors began moving in slow circles. Some recited psalms, others sang softly under their breath. For decades, such acts would have been stopped by police within moments. But now, they were happening in plain view. Since 1967, the status quo agreement has been the thin thread holding the Mount's fragile peace together. No open prayer for Jews or Christians. No religious symbols. No Bibles or prayer books carried past the gates. The rules were clear, until they weren't. The images captured that day showed something no official statement could hide. The rules were already bending. For some, it was a moment of triumph. For others, a warning that the Mount was entering a new and dangerous phase. And yet, this was not a lone event. It was part of a growing movement, one that has been gathering momentum for years and which is no longer content to be confined to the realm of private devotion. Because the movement for the temple's return is no longer just religious, it is becoming deeply political. The movement to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem was once largely confined to religious circles. For decades, it consisted mainly of small organizations, rabbis, and groups focused on education and ritual preparation. Its activities included studying the laws of the temple, constructing ritual vessels, and training priests for potential future service. In recent years, however, the temple movement has become increasingly visible in the public sphere. It is no longer purely a matter of religious devotion. It has begun to adopt political strategies, public campaigns, and media outreach. One example is a professionally produced video released by OU Israel, a well-known Jewish organization. The presentation featured 3D renderings of a reconstructed temple, scenes of worshipers from many nations, and a message suggesting that rebuilding the temple would bring peace to the world. The video was widely shared online and discussed in Israeli media, indicating that the message was reaching beyond the movement's traditional supporters. From a prophetic perspective, this vision aligns with certain interpretations of biblical texts. In Christian eschatology, particularly in the Book of Daniel and the Book of Revelation, a restored temple is linked to events in the last days, including the appearance of a leader who promises peace, but ultimately brings deception and conflict. The spread of temple imagery has also become noticeable in everyday life. Posters, educational materials, and even highway signs in some areas include depictions of the temple. This normalization of the image suggests a slow but deliberate effort to integrate the idea into the national consciousness. The critical question is not whether people are talking about rebuilding the temple. They are. The question is how Israel could gain the authority to proceed with construction on a site currently under separate religious administration. The Temple Mount is under Israeli security control, but day-to-day administration of the site is handled by the Islamic Waqf, under Jordanian oversight. Any move to change this arrangement would have significant political and diplomatic consequences. Analysts generally point to three possible scenarios in which Israel could obtain full control. Scenario 1. A political or peace agreement. This could emerge from a broader Middle East peace treaty, possibly involving territorial compromises or new security guarantees. Such an agreement could, in theory, include provisions granting Israel more authority over the Mount, potentially allowing for Jewish worship, or even construction of a temple. This aligns with interpretations of Daniel 9:27, which describes a covenant made with Israel for a set period before being broken. Scenario 2. A crisis event. This might involve a major security incident, military conflict, or a collapse of the current administrative framework. In such a situation, Israel could take direct control, citing the need to maintain order. History shows that in times of conflict, control of the Mount can shift quickly, as it did during the Six-Day War in 1967. Scenario 3. A grassroots religious movement. If Jewish visitation and worship on the Mount continue to increase, and public opinion in Israel shifts strongly toward reclaiming the site, political leaders may eventually act to formalize what is already happening informally. Each of these paths carries risks. Any change to the status quo would be met with strong regional and international reaction. Yet these scenarios are being openly discussed, not only by religious groups, but in political and academic settings. And they are not discussed in a vacuum. They are emerging in the context of escalating regional instability. The current situation in the region is already highly volatile. Conflict continues in Gaza, with Israeli forces engaged in prolonged military operations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly stated his intention to extend Israeli control over the entire Gaza Strip, a goal that, if achieved, would mark a significant territorial shift. These developments occur alongside shifting alliances in the Middle East, including normalization talks between Israel and Arab states, as well as growing tensions with Iran and its allied groups. From a biblical prophecy standpoint, such conditions are seen by many as a potential precursor to the events described in Daniel and Revelation. Daniel speaks of a leader making a covenant with Israel, only to break it midway, leading to what is called the abomination of desolation in the temple. The book of Revelation also describes a period of apparent peace, followed by sudden global upheaval. While political analysts may interpret these events purely in terms of security and strategy, many religious observers view them as part of a larger, prophetic framework. The convergence of political ambition, religious movements, and regional conflict creates an environment in which rapid change is possible. And that brings the discussion back to a central point. Amid all the speculation about the temple, there is a need to remember what has already been fulfilled, and what those fulfillments mean. For believers in the Bible, many prophecies have already been fulfilled in remarkable detail. The Old Testament foretold the Messiah's birth to a virgin, Isaiah 7:14, his birthplace in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2, his descent from the line of David, Jeremiah 23:5, and his suffering and death by crucifixion, Psalm 22, Isaiah 53. It even described the piercing of his hands and feet and the casting of lots for his garments, events recorded in the Gospels. All of these were fulfilled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. For Christians, this is the defining truth. Jesus is the Messiah promised in Scripture. The concern, according to the New Testament, is that in the last days, another figure will appear. one who will enter the temple and claim divine authority. This individual, often called the Antichrist, will deceive many. That is why, beyond the political developments and construction plans, the essential prayer for the Jewish people is that they will recognize their Messiah before this deception takes place. The events we see today, whether political negotiations, religious demonstrations, or military campaigns, are significant, but they are not the ultimate sign. The ultimate sign is the fulfillment of God's promises through His Son, and the call to remain watchful in light of what Scripture has already revealed.
The moment when these new immigrants step onto the tarmac here at Ben Gurion Airport as the time when the words of the Bible written thousands of years ago come to life.
In the last decade alone, over 250,000 Jews have returned to Israel, fulfilling a prophecy that stretches back thousands of years. From the distant lands of India to the highlands of Ethiopia, Jews are coming home in numbers unlike any other time in history. This mass return is not just a political shift. It's a direct fulfillment of ancient biblical promises. Consider the tribe of Manasseh, scattered by the Assyrians over 2,700 years ago, now returning to Israel. Or the Ethiopian Jews, known as the Falash Mura, whose long-awaited return is bringing ancient promises to life. Prophets like Ezekiel foresaw this great gathering of Israel's dispersed tribes. What we are witnessing today is no mere coincidence. This is a divine signal of the times we are living in. The question is, how close are we to the second coming of Jesus Christ? Stay with me until the end to uncover the full prophetic significance of these incredible events. Let's step back in time. Over 4,000 years ago, God called a man named Abraham. Picture this: a man living in a place he knew, surrounded by people he loved, and yet God asked him to leave it all behind. Go to the land I will show you. No details, no map, just a promise. Abraham, trusting in this call, obeys. And through his faith, God sets in motion something extraordinary. God makes a covenant with Abraham, a promise that would ripple through generations. I will make you into a great nation, he tells Abraham. This wasn't just a promise for Abraham, it was for his children, his children's children, and beyond. Isaac, Abraham's son, inherits this promise. Then comes Jacob, Isaac's son, who, after wrestling with God, is renamed Israel. From his 12 sons would come the 12 tribes that would form the nation of Israel. But the journey isn't easy. Israel's path leads them to Egypt, where they become enslaved for centuries. Can you imagine? A people trapped in oppression, their cries for freedom rising to God. And God doesn't forget them. He raises up Moses, a reluctant leader at first, but one who would carry the Israelites to freedom. Through Moses, God performs mighty miracles, plagues, parting seas, leading the people out of Egypt. It's a story that doesn't just speak to the Israelites, but to anyone who's ever felt trapped, hopeless, or lost. At Mount Sinai, God gives the people the law, a sacred guide that would shape their identity. These weren't just laws, they were the foundation of their relationship with God, their way of living out the covenant. It's a relationship built on trust, faith, and love. And even when they stumbled, as they often did, God didn't abandon them. Under Joshua's leadership, the people enter Canaan, the Promised Land. It's a land full of promise, but also challenges. They face battles, enemies, and struggles. But they are a people with a divine purpose: to worship God in this land, to live by His law, and to be a light to the nations around them. Fast forward a few generations, and Israel reaches a high point under King David. David, a shepherd turned warrior, unites the 12 tribes and makes Jerusalem the heart of the nation. Under his reign, Israel becomes a powerful kingdom. But David's legacy is not just in the victories on the battlefield, it's in his vision for a temple to honor God. Though he is not allowed to build it, his plans set the stage for Solomon, his son, to build the first temple in Jerusalem. Solomon, known for his wisdom, wealth, and peace, takes the throne. The kingdom flourishes. Jerusalem becomes a symbol of Israel's strength, and the temple stands as a testament to God's presence among his people. It's a time of prosperity, a golden age for Israel. But as we know, nothing lasts forever. After Solomon's death, the kingdom is divided. 10 tribes form the northern kingdom of Israel, while 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, remain in the south. The division creates a fracture, both politically and spiritually. The northern kingdom quickly falls into idolatry, turning away from the God who had brought them so far. And because of this spiritual disobedience, Israel faces its downfall. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians invade, and the 10 tribes are lost. Their fate is unknown, scattered and absorbed into other nations. The southern kingdom of Judah holds on a little longer, but isn't immune to its own struggles. In 586 BCE, the Babylonians conquer Judah, destroy the temple, and exile the people to Babylon. It's a moment of profound loss. Jerusalem in ruins, the people displaced. The dream of a unified, sovereign Israel seems shattered. Yet even in exile, the prophets remind the people that God has not forgotten his promises. One of the most powerful prophecies comes from Ezekiel, who speaks of dry bones coming back to life, a vision of Israel's resurrection. Though the people are scattered, God's promise remains. He will bring them back. It's a message of hope in the midst of despair. And so, a partial return comes under the Persian king Cyrus, who allows the Israelites to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. But it's not the same as before. Israel is still under foreign rule, and their independence remains a distant dream. It's a partial restoration, a glimmer of the promise, but not its fulfillment. In 70 CE, the Romans destroy the Second Temple, and the Jewish people are scattered once more. The great diaspora begins. For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people will wander the earth, but the hope of returning to the land of Israel never dies. The prophets' words, their promises, linger in the hearts of the Jewish people. You will return. For nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people lived outside their land. They scattered across Europe, North Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Everywhere they went, they carried with them a longing, a memory, a hope of a return to the land of Israel. But the world they inhabited was often hostile. For centuries, Jews faced persecution, discrimination, and violence. They were expelled from kingdoms, forced into ghettos, and subjected to pogroms. Violent attacks meant to break their spirit and erase their identity. But even in the darkest times, this hope, this longing, never died. It was kept alive through family stories, songs, prayers, and rituals passed down from generation to generation. The dreams of returning to Israel were never forgotten. The suffering, however, was unimaginable. In the 20th century, the world witnessed the darkest chapter of Jewish suffering, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews perished in the concentration camps, victims of one of history's most horrific genocides. Entire communities were wiped out, families torn apart, and the brutal scale of the suffering left deep scars. Yet, even in the face of such devastation, the spirit of the Jewish people endured. Amidst the horrors, they continued to hold on to their identity, their faith, and the promise of return. For some, the Holocaust only strengthened the resolve to reclaim their homeland. The suffering, tragic as it was, became a catalyst for a new chapter, a prophetic rebirth. And then, in 1948, against all odds, Israel was reborn. After nearly 2,000 years of exile, a modern state emerged from the ashes of the past, fulfilling what seemed to be an impossible dream. The State of Israel was declared. It was a momentous event, not just for the Jewish people, but for the world. The land that had once been promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob now had a place for the people to call home once again. The words of Ezekiel 36:24 echoed in this moment. "I will take you from the nations and bring you to your own land." This wasn't just a political event. It was the fulfillment of prophecy. It was a sign that something greater was at work in the world. The Jewish people were not only returning to a land, but were part of a divine plan, a plan foretold long before. This return to the land was not merely the product of human effort. It was a miraculous event, shaped by both historical forces and spiritual purposes. It was also the rise of Zionism, a movement that sought the restoration of the Jewish homeland in Israel. Zionism was, at its core, a prophetic movement, a movement that saw the return to Israel as not just a political goal, but a fulfillment of ancient promises. From 1948 onward, millions of Jews began to make Aliyah, the return to Israel. Jews from all over the globe, from Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, the Americas, and beyond, began to come home. The story of the Jewish return to Israel became a global phenomenon. It wasn't just a story about politics or migration. It was a story about fulfillment, about God's faithfulness to His people, and about a people's dream realized. This return to the land was visible. It was tangible. But even more than that, it was a sign of God's faithfulness, a sign of prophecy being fulfilled right before our eyes. As we look to the present, we see that the return of the Jewish people to Israel is not just a thing of the past. It is unfolding before our eyes in ways that fulfill prophecies from thousands of years ago. These stories are not only about politics and migration. They are about destiny, about God's promises being realized, one by one. Let's explore some of the most profound fulfillments of prophecy in our time. The tribe of Manasseh, Ben Manash. More than 2,700 years ago, the 10 northern tribes of Israel were exiled by the Assyrians, scattered across distant lands. One of those tribes, Manasseh, seemed lost to history. For centuries, the descendants of this tribe wandered through Asia, settling in India. Over time, they maintained their distinct Jewish identity, preserving their customs, their faith, their connection to their roots. Fast forward to modern times, and something extraordinary happens. Thousands of these descendants, the Ben Manash, begin to make their way back to Israel. Their return closes a 27-century-old cycle, a prophecy long held in the hearts of the Jewish people. It is a fulfillment so remarkable, so deeply tied to history, that it resonates with the ancient promises made to Israel. Immigration from France. In recent years, the Jewish return to Israel has been more than just a spiritual movement. It's a response to the shifting currents of the world. Take, for instance, the surge in immigration from France. In 2021, there was a 137% increase in Jewish immigration from France to Israel. Over 6,000 new immigration files were opened, a sign that the prophetic momentum of return is only accelerating. This wave, driven by growing concerns about anti-Semitism in Europe, further demonstrates the urgency and necessity of the Jewish return to their homeland. Operation Dove's Wings, Ethiopian Jews. Another powerful story of return is the saga of the Ethiopian Jews, descendants of ancient Israelites. For centuries, these Jews lived in isolation, their faith and traditions preserved through the generations. But they faced enormous challenges. In Ethiopia, many were forcibly converted to Christianity. But despite this, they kept their customs alive: the Sabbath, the kosher laws, circumcision, unyielding to the forces that sought to change them. In 1991, Operation Dove's Wings brought more than 14,000 Ethiopian Jews to Israel in a miraculous airlift. Today, over 75,000 Ethiopian Jews have made Aliyah, with the number rising to more than 150,000, including children. Their return is a testament to resilience, to the power of faith, and to the truth of prophecy. Despite the challenges of integrating into Israeli society, many Ethiopian Jews have thrived, contributing to the fabric of Israel's future. Ethiopian Operation Zur Israel. Among the most emotional stories of return is the Ethiopian Operation Zur Israel. Over 300 Ethiopian Jews were airlifted to Israel in a dramatic operation, accompanied by emotional ceremonies. For many of these returnees, it was a moment of profound significance. As they stepped off the planes, many kissed the ground, sounded the shofar, and celebrated this prophetic fulfillment with tears of joy. The bond between these people and their homeland was undeniable as they returned home to Israel, fulfilling a promise generations in the making. Aliyah from Ukraine. More recently, the conflict in Ukraine has led to another surge in Aliyah. Over 130 Ukrainian Jews, fleeing the violence and instability of the war, have immigrated to Israel. This, too, is a fulfillment of prophecy, coordinated by Jewish and Christian organizations working together. The imagery of the Jewish people returning from the corners of the earth is a powerful testament to Isaiah's vision. I will bring them from the east and gather them from the west. Isaiah 43:5. What was once scattered is now coming together. North American Aliyah. And even from North America, Jews are making their way to Israel. In a special flight, 2,000 Jews from the US and Canada arrived in Israel. Doctors, leaders, soldiers, each contributing to the strength and future of the state. They too are part of the prophetic unfolding of Israel's destiny, stepping into a story that stretches back thousands of years. The global story of Jewish return is not confined to a single country or a single group. Jews are returning from Latin America, Europe, Africa, Asia, from every corner of the globe. The diverse communities, cultures, and languages of these returnees are a living testament to the reach and scope of God's promise. These returns are part of a divine blueprint, one written thousands of years ago, unfolding in our time. The return of the Jewish people to their homeland isn't just a historical event. It's the fulfillment of ancient prophecies that were written thousands of years ago. These prophecies, scattered throughout the Bible, have been waiting for the right time to come to life. And now, we see them unfolding before our very eyes. In Ezekiel 37:21 through 22, God says, "I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, and bring them into their own land. They shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again." This isn't just a promise, it's a declaration of God's intent to bring His people back together, no longer scattered, no longer divided. Israel will be restored as one nation, united once again. And we can see that happening in our time, with Jews from around the world returning to their land. Then, in Isaiah 11:12, we hear that God will gather His people from the four corners of the earth. This is the gathering we're witnessing today. The Jewish people, scattered for centuries across Europe, North Africa, Asia, and the Americas, are returning. God is bringing them home, physically, spiritually, and prophetically. But this isn't just about physical return. The book of Revelation gives us a glimpse of something much bigger. In Revelation 7:4-8, we read about the 144,000 sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel. This number might seem strange at first, but it's vital. The Bible specifically names the tribes, and these are real tribes, not symbolic ones. God is saying that before the final judgment, all 12 tribes will be restored in their land, and the 144,000 will be a key part of the end times events. They will go out into the world, sharing the gospel during times of tribulation. Their return to the land isn't just a physical homecoming, it's setting the stage for the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan. So, as we see the Jewish people returning, it's not just about a nation reclaiming its land. It's about prophecy coming to life. It's about the world moving toward the fulfillment of God's promises. And the return of these tribes is a sign that something much bigger is on the horizon. As clear as the prophecy of the 144,000 is, it has been widely misunderstood. Some people, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, argue that this number is symbolic, representing a special group of spiritual believers rather than actual Israelites. But if you look at the text, it's hard to ignore that the tribes are named Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher. These are real, literal tribes. The 144,000 are not some metaphor for a spiritual group. They are actual descendants of Israel. Similarly, the Seventh-day Adventists have interpreted the 144,000 as symbolizing those who keep the Sabbath. But once again, the Bible doesn't give us that kind of symbolic interpretation. It's pretty straightforward. The 144,000 are the actual people of Israel. The names of the tribes are clear, and so is the prophecy. These tribes, which were scattered for thousands of years, will be gathered together again. We have to take the Bible for what it says. The return of the Jewish people to Israel and the sealing of the 144,000 from the 12 tribes is not some vague allegorical idea. It's literal. It's happening. And understanding this helps us grasp the enormity of the moment we're living in. The 144,000 are not a symbol for something spiritual, but real people, a part of God's plan for the end times. Their return to the land marks a critical step in the unfolding of prophecy. As we witness the unfolding return of the Jewish people to their homeland, it's essential to pause and reflect theologically on what this truly means. Despite centuries of rejection, despite Israel's refusal to accept the Messiah, God has not rejected Israel. This is a powerful truth. In Romans 9-11, the Apostle Paul emphasizes that God's promises to Israel are irrevocable. God's covenant with His people is not based on their acceptance or rejection, but on His faithfulness. The return of the Jews to Israel is proof of that, proof that God's covenant is eternal and unfolding before our eyes. Each Jewish return is another page in the story of God's unbreakable faithfulness. It's not just about geography or politics, it's about divine fidelity. It's about God keeping His word, no matter the circumstances, no matter the obstacles. The fact that, after thousands of years, Jews are returning to Israel is not simply a historical event, it's a theological statement. It is God fulfilling the promises He made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These promises were not conditional, they were eternal. The Jewish people's return is a living testimony to that unbreakable covenant. It's a declaration that God will never forsake His people. As we watch these prophecies unfold, we are reminded that God's faithfulness is not bound by time or circumstance. His promises stand firm. And so, the return of the Jews to Israel is not just a moment to be observed, It's a moment to be understood within the framework of God's unyielding love and His plan for the world. The story is still being written, and God is still guiding it. As we wrap up this journey, it's important to see the bigger picture. This return of the Jewish people is not political, it's prophetic. Each immigrant coming home fulfills a biblical promise, confirming the covenant between God and His people. This is not coincidence, it's prophecy being fulfilled in real time. The restoration is still unfolding, but it's clear. Israel's return is a signpost pointing toward the end times. It's both a warning and a message of hope. God is not finished with His people or with the world. Could the return of the 12 tribes signal Christ's coming? The signs are undeniable. Now is the time to watch, discern, and prepare. This is not just a moment to observe, but to align our lives with God's purpose. Are you ready for what's to come? Let this prophetic movement stir your heart and guide you toward a deeper understanding of the times we live in.